We first met on a late afternoon in September. Although the day had been sunny and warm, it had also begun to cool off, and shadows fell as we seated ourselves around the small picnic table at the South Hadley Community Gardens. We spoke in abstracts about the project we were about to commence, and although I can't speak for others, I must say I did not quite know what I was getting myself into. The next thing I knew, I was tramping through the woods with measuring tape, yelling out lengths and giving trees fancy names such as Y-tree and snake.
Yeah, I'm getting stuck on the bramble.
We were all there due to our general interest in permaculture. But let me back up a bit. When I say we, I am referring to my student counterparts, Brittany and Lizzie, and our fearless leader / co-conspirator, Lisa Burke.
Do you want to zoom in on the snake tree?
When I say permaculture, I mean, well, the explanation is a bit more complex. The dictionary definition of permaculture, straight from the horse's mouth, or more specifically from the guys who coined the phrase, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, is an integrated evolving system of perennial or self-perpetuating plant and animal species useful to man. Now, this definition comes to us from the distant time of the 1970s. Holmgren refined the definition in a more recent publication as being consciously designed landscapes which mimic the patterns and relationships found in nature while yielding an abundance of food, fiber, and energy for the provision of local needs. To me, this means the edible garden is to a degree self-sustainable. With a mixture of trees and shrubs and other such varied vegetation, it is in itself an ecosystem. An interconnected system of biotic and abiotic factors, those living and non-living, that work together and exist together in some sort of homeostasis. From the trees, to the shrubs, to the rocks, and to the soil, a system. As we five sat there in the fading fall light, we discussed what the permaculture garden could mean for the South Hadley Community Garden as a whole. We decided that the permaculture garden would serve, 1, as an extension of the garden for production, more food would be produced, and 2, to promote the mental and community health by the pleasing atmosphere it will create. To delve into our project and realize our plan beyond the picnic table, we all, Lizzie, Sue, not pictured here, Brittany, Lisa, and I began to measure and map the potential area, tramping, as I mentioned before, around the woods, compost piles, and random boulders to develop the potential area designated for the permaculture garden. Though the weather was less than stellar and our footwear ranged from waterproof boots to water-absorbing sneakers, we took 2 large measuring tapes, some graph paper and pencils, and started measuring at one of the fence posts of the community garden. The idea was to use a sort of triangle method for measuring the distance from point A to point B by using triangles to work with the uneven tree line and plan a more organic space, as opposed to creating a simple rectangle to measure the planned space for the garden. Using this triangle method, one person would stand at a designated point A, and the other would take the tape and journey to designated point B, shouting out the length in feet to a third person with a graph paper and pencil who would hurriedly document the length and draw the appropriate points on the map. Point A's and B's had to be distinctive plants around the to-be-mapped area itself, so we could go back, eventually, and distinguish to what point we had made the actual measurements. In between our tramping sessions at the garden, we got together during afternoons and evenings, squeezing in an hour here and there to begin the process of taking our measurements that we had gotten outside and translating them onto graph paper, eventually creating a scaled-down map of the space we wanted to work with and the selected tree points we were using as the perimeter. To explain this process might be a bit too complicated to say in so many words, but here I will try to communicate the process. The first point that we marked was tree number 1, or snake tree, which we estimated to be about perpendicular from the fence post. We then took, for example, the measurement from fence post to tree number 2, affectionately called doubletree. We would then use a ruler to mark that point, the scaled down length. Here, 1 square was equal to about 2.5 feet. Then, taking a protractor, we would draw a curve indicating the potential points where that tree could be. Then, we did the same thing from snake tree to doubletree, measuring the length that we had measured in the field, again marking a curve where the tree potentially could be. Where those two curves met would be the correct location of the tree. This is the triangle method of mapping. We carried this out for all of the preceding points we mapped. We also found time to read selected literature on permaculture. Lisa provided Brittany, Lizzie, and I 3 readings to get acquainted with some permaculture ideas, concepts, and terminology, so we could begin to gain a better understanding of this truly unruly art form. Issues and Strategies in Forest Garden Design and Management, a chapter of the book Edible Forest Gardens, Volume 1 by David Jack and Eric Toonsmeer, introduced such concepts as sustainable water demand, self-renewing fertility, and minimal herbivory, leading to over-yielding polycultures, leading to directed succession, leading to maximum self-maintenance, ecological health, and high diverse yields, all included in the goals of creating and maintaining a permaculture garden. Another reading entitled Analyzing Your Inward and Outward Sites provided insight on how to position spaces and plants in gardens to provide an array of spatial experiences, from being encircled in the quote-unquote sea to standing on top of the sky. The third reading we got was from the first chapter of Eric Toonsmeer's and Jonathan Bates's Paradise Lot, entitled Germination. It gave a lot of general background on how these two got started on their permaculture garden in Holyoke, Mass. We started reading these together, going through foreign terminology, discussing concepts, and considering what all these readings can offer to our own permaculture garden. Individually, too, we poked around to broaden our horizons. One such pursuit of greater knowledge brought me to a fully fledged permaculture garden just a few miles away from South Hadley, in the town of Holyoke, Mass. This garden is Food Forest Farm, created years ago by 2 friends, Eric Toonsmeer and Jonathan Bates. If you can recall, just a few moments ago, we told you all we read the introduction to their book, Paradise Lot. Yeah, these were the guys. I achieved the pleasure of seeing their garden with my own eyes by volunteering for a garden help day on their website, foodforestfarm.com. Most of my time there was spent helping with some plant and tool organization for the winter, recycling soil, stacking pots, and moving logs around. We were able to take a break in the midst of work and get a short tour of the garden.
So the front garden, it has been, the goal has been to be like a show piece for the neighborhood.
A few things that sparked my interest were the persimmon tree, the fruit of which we got to snack upon, and the experimental miniature project of fish farming and hydroponics, which was set up in this little greenhouse on the property. Before all the volunteers left, we had the pleasure of getting more fresh fruit snacks, native pawpaw and hardy kiwi. Now, this garden is different from the space that we hope to develop in many ways. To mention a few, this space was already delineated for them. It is a rectangular yard, and their environment is in the city, whereas ours will be in the country, bordering a small nature preserve. Nonetheless, this trip was enlightening, and it gave me a lot of cool ideas for the vegetation options for our own garden. Who would have known that there were hardy varieties of kiwis? Seeking even more information and resources, Lizzie consulted Professor Amy Frary of Mount Holyoke College on plant identification techniques and local flora. Amy Frary was particularly knowledgeable on typical tree species in the area, from birch to beech, and gave a guide for plant identification, a particularly handy resource when identifying the trees surrounding the permaculture garden site. We were able to utilize this identification guide in the field. We knew that it would be important to know what tree species there were bordering the space we hoped to develop. Different trees can add or take specific and essential nutrients from the soil. Thus, this knowledge will be applied when we begin to make decisions of what vegetation we will want to plant. We were also able to consult with Larry Du Bois on his digital mapping version of the permaculture site. Larry took us through the process and techniques for digital mapping, showing us his maps on South Hadley's Community Garden and the surrounding areas.
My name is Larry Du Bois, and I and Linda Young organized the garden initially, and we created the initial community garden in 2009.
Larry has been very involved in the community garden over the years and was actually one of the first people to come up with the idea of creating a permaculture garden at this site. Because of this, we hope to work more with him in the future for further development of the garden. This is what we have been working on for this semester. We still have so much to accomplish, from cleaning up the area we plan to use, pruning and clearing. We plan to get in touch with Larry about the eventual removal of the sand piles that are currently in the way. Not to mention the creating of a design layout and a blueprint, and eventually choosing the trees, shrubs, and plants we think will work well together in the space. Despite all these plans for the future, a class presentation was approaching us. We had to produce a piece of work that displayed the progress made so far and tie that into our final project. So, for our class exposition, we showed our map. After presenting on the garden experience and explaining the mapping process, we actively taught our classmates about some of the processes involved with the project, like tree identification. We split the class into 3 different groups and passed out the tree identification guides. Eagerly, our participating classmates opened them and grabbed twigs to identify. As the presentation came to an end, we told that much work is still needed to complete this project, and we are determined to see this project all the way through to the end of next semester. The creation of that map will come in handy when we start to move on toward a potential design for the edible permaculture garden. What we have ultimately learned this semester is that when working on a real-world project, everything is subject to change, and what you originally planned will probably end up being something entirely different. By the end of next semester, our hope is to create a valuable space for the South Hadley Community Garden. We wish for our hard work to be continued by others that will follow in our footsteps and take up the pieces from the groundwork of our project and add in more ideas and wonderful additions to this project. Over the years, we wish for this permaculture garden to grow from our humble ideas into something truly useful and beautiful that the community garden will be proud to have.